Hey, what's up, friends? This is International Master David Pruess for Chess.com, and today showing you a really, really sweet game. Before I get to the game, I'm just going to quickly tell you the context in which this game was played. This game was played in a match between International Master Greg Shahade and FIDE Master Arun Sharma. And this was a special match. They were playing a 3-hour Blitz match for cash. It's a new series of events we're doing on Chess.com called Death Matches, where we get two people together who are hopefully really good and hopefully have some kind of a grudge against each other, and we let them bash each other's brains out for 3 hours in a long series of Blitz games. So these games are played really fast with a bunch of money on the line and a huge crowd watching and live commentary. So under that situation, you would not usually expect to find the best quality chess being played. I mean, just simply off the time control, it's hard to play that well in a 5-minute game, to play like a full, consistent, good quality game. But the players we're inviting are good enough that sometimes that does happen. So here we have what I think is probably the sweetest game from the match, although there were several other good ones. So in this game, Sharma is white and Shahade is black. So Arun starts with d4 and Greg plays the Nimzo Indian, one of his main defenses that he was going to use in this match. And Sharma is using a system called the classical, where you move the queen here and then attack the bishops, so that when you recapture this knight on c3, which you're sort of forcing black to do, when you recapture this knight on c3, you've avoided getting doubled pawns. On the other hand, the cost of getting to this point involved moving the queen twice and playing a3, which this pawn move hasn't contributed to your development. And black lost one move playing bishop takes knight, but white spent sort of 3 moves basically getting the queen into position and getting the bishop pair. So it makes sense that black should be doing very well here if they just fight back sharply in the center of the board, right? They want to fight before white can sort of finish their development and have a nice position with the two bishops controlling the board. So it's important for black to play kind of precisely here, but if they play aggressively, they should be good, and this is a good start, d5. The 3 moves I would look at here would be b5, c5, and d5. If I were looking at this position for the first time in my life, d5 would be the most logical. And white continues aggressively here. I mean, they could still play e3, just trying to solidify the center and develop more calmly. This bishop obviously would have to start out inside the pawn structure then. Would take a little bit longer to get going maybe, but it would be a slightly safer way to play maybe. But aggressive play from white, and now black takes on c4, and white captures with the queen, and b6 is played, and the point here is to develop the bishop while gaining another little bit of time. So rook d1 is played, and this is a weird move, but typical of this, queen c2 opening. And basically, like, what white is afraid of is that if they play a normal move, like let's say e3, then bishop a6, queen comes back, takes here, and black's just going to start opening up the position immediately like this, right? So the point of putting the rook on d1 was to stop that kind of a c5 move, right? So white plays the rook opposite the queen. I mean, this is mainline opening theory, but as you can tell, I'm not like the greatest fan of this style of play for white. So black develops the bishop, as he said he would, and develops the knight. And notice he's not getting too frisky just yet. He's just speedily developing, but he's ready to try and hit back at white with e5 or c5 pretty soon to destabilize the center. Depends how white plays. So e4 was played, and h6. White keeps the bishop pair because that's sort of his main advantage here, is having the two bishops. And black's going to trade on f1. Oh yeah, and I forgot, this was like a funny moment. So h6 was actually a blunder because these bishops were facing each other. This was like a crazy blitz moment where the commentators were like screaming like, oh my god, because obviously what black is supposed to do is trade on f1 and then play h6, right? And he was just blazing along so fast. He played h6 first. White was also blazing along and just played bishop h4, not noticing that they could win a piece here. Do you see how? The answer would be to trade on f6 first because your bishop attacks the queen, and then when black recaptures, then you could take on a6 with a free piece. So that was a a moment that both players rued later. But other than that, this is a really good game. Okay, so now queen to c8 is played. That unpins this knight from the bishop, right? And it gets the queen off the file of the rook. It prepares to maybe push c5 using the queen, and in some cases the queen could come to one of these two squares. Notice the light squared bishops just traded, so that means all these light squared diagonals could be a little bit tender. They're good places to put your queen. So now white plays a restricting move, queen c6. And the point of this move is to prevent black from playing c5, which is what black probably would have played if white had made some move with their knight developing. Black would have probably played c5, and the game is about equal. So white tries to prevent that with the more aggressive queen to c6. And certainly one of the reasons this game became such an exciting game is because white, Arun, Sharma, was playing really sharply himself as white here, trying the maximum to hold black into a positional disadvantage, even though he still needed to catch up on his development. And black answered here with a great pawn sack, which is absolutely the way to play in this kind of a situation. I mean, white's restraining you. You can't play c5. You have no way to get your rooks into the game just yet, but you're ahead in development and white hasn't castled. What do? I mean, you just need to bust out. Okay? So e5 was played by Greg Shahade. Brilliant pawn sacrifice here. And if white takes, of course, that's bad for white. Black just takes with a knight, and now black's coming out quickly to these files, and his knights are in the game. But the critical variation is going to be when white takes on f6. And here, if Greg's plan had been to take back with the pawn, well, his position is just miserable here. White brings out the knight to either square, and at some point the knight will find its way to f5, outpost square. The black king's structure is shattered, and white is going to have a big advantage here no matter what happens, I would say, at this point. So, of course, that wasn't the plan. The plan was to move this knight onto greener pastures, even though it loses the pawn on e5. At this point, I think it was probably Arun's final mistake to capture the pawn. I think what he should do is develop this knight, of course, and bring it out, say, to e2 or something like that. Just developing the knight. White's position is definitely bad at this point. Black is having a chance to attack these pawns by bringing out the rook, by playing queen g4, and white is still a long way from developing this rook. So this whole position doesn't look good for white at this point, but I think taking the offered gambit pawn was the last mistake. Now, see if you, during the last few moves of this game, can try and guess along as to what black's move should be. It'll be a really good exercise for you, and potentially really satisfying if you get any of the moves right. So here you are as black. It's your move. Obviously, you're going to have some compensation for the pawn because white hasn't castled. You want to get to open lines. You want to attack him, but how do you get started here? What's the best way to go about this? You're going to have to pause the video if you want to answer any of these questions because I'm just going to keep going here. During the live show, I was thinking that I would probably go to g4 to take e5. That was my first instinct. And then I realized, oh my gosh, there's some other possibility, and that's what Greg did. He played a stronger move, which is queen a6 check first. Now, the reason this is better is because let's say he plays knight g4, and white plays knight f3, defending that pawn. Now queen a6 check, let's say, and the king comes over here. It's harder for black to finish white off in this situation, I think, than in the situation in the game where black makes the white king and knight even more awkward, which is not to say that this position isn't crushingly good for black, which I think it is anyway. But you'll see that what he does in the game is clearly better. He gives this queen check at a very awkward moment for white. White blocks with the knight, and now the knight and the king are sort of tied up, and that makes it harder for the king to try and walk away and let the rook into the game. Now, what's the next move? That's your next quiz, and I'm already showing the answer. So, rook to d8, getting on that open file to try and get to that open first rank and checkmate the white king. So immediately going for back rank mate, white has no time to capture this knight clearly. For example, here's a crucial variation which didn't happen in the game. White could trade and try and make space for his king to get out, right? Then after rook check, king comes up, and rook takes rook, king takes rook. Black's now able to grab this knight. Remember, it was awkwardly being defended by the king. And white doesn't have time to take the knight back himself because of checkmate. Okay, so that is a big problem for white. that they cannot yet evacuate their king like that. So what white did was brought the queen back to defend the rook on d1. All right, so how does black increase the pressure here? Build up the tactical energy and really beat white down for having this rook stuck on h1 here. Well, it's not by running away with his knight. The answer is queen c4, brilliant move. You guys remember that this is a blitz game we're looking at? Just incredible, right? The fans obviously went wild when this move was played. The reasoning behind it is queen takes queen, rook takes d1 is ample payback for the queen sacrifice. So Arun was forced to move the queen away while still defending the rook. And now the knight is able to move into a better square than it would have been before black's whole tactical sequence. Comes to e4, threatening knight d2 check, which would win material, right? Because it would attack the king and queen. So Sharma struggles along with the best defensive move here, queen to c1, defending against knight d2, and not actually threatening to take the queen. So what should black do now to keep trying to destroy white? Well, the key is to win control of the d file, as it turns out. So look at black's incisive next move. Even though the queen was so good on this diagonal, black now switches the queen over to a4, just trying to take control of this file. That's like the goal for black, is just to get control of the open file by attacking d1. And here Sharma couldn't find anything, was running out of time at the last moment, played king to e1 to defend d1, and then quickly resigned before Greg could play anything. But obviously Greg would have won with the following combination, which Arun saw, and that's why he resigned. But he's just going to trade everything off here and then take on f2, and when the king moves, takes the rook, and it's an easy win for black. So really, really phenomenal game. Very, very classic game for how to respond when your opponent has a long time advantage, right? So white has the advantage of the bishop pair. He's got black sort of at a disadvantage in the center in terms of center pawns, and he's cramped black's c-pawn. Well, the way you respond is you really have to just fight your way out no matter what. So that is what black did here with a series of brilliant moves. And even if you can't find all of these moves and calculate them for sure in your own games, what I think you can do is look at the right kind of moves and then try them. You know, if you're in this kind of situation as black where your opponent's king hasn't castled, try some of this aggressive stuff. Try and get better at playing it. See if you can sort of, by instinct at least, come up with some of these good moves. You know, going after this file was great, the queen sack. And, you know, just try to learn how to play this way, because it's a really important skill to have in chess, to be able to really punish your opponent if they don't castle. All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you around on Chess.com.